My name is Renee and I'm an alcoholic. Lame. It was suggested to me by people who know better that I should try to get my story out. So I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone right now, but whatever, what do I have to lose? I tend to say inappropriate things, so I will probably piss people off, but know ahead of time that's not my intention. My childhood was great. I have amazing parents. My mother was the best kind of mother you could ever ask for and loved me unconditionally no matter what I did. My father was the disciplinarian and the ass kicker, meaning he just worked really, really, really hard to provide for his family. He had 3 jobs many times in his life. I have a younger brother who's special needs. I was a really good student up until puberty. And then I started getting into drugs and alcohol and started having widespread body pain. I was tired all the time. Started getting problems with my digestive system. Mom took me to the doctor many, many times for 4 years. They couldn't figure it out. And around 13, 14, I started drinking. Started smoking cigarettes because I took cigarettes out of my dad's pack. I became promiscuous at age 14 and started filling up the empty hole in my heart with drugs, alcohol, and boys. And that lasted for many years. After 4 years of going to doctor after doctor, when I was 16, I finally got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. So at that time, I was just smoking pot, drinking, eating nasty, bad food, asking for a ride to school when it was about 3 blocks away to walk. I was lazy. And the only way to manage it at the time, they told me, was with stress reduction, exercise, healthy diet. Wow, I forget the last one already. I don't remember the 4th one. It started the need to learn how to take care of myself, even though I wasn't ready yet. I moved from a small town, Midwest, to Southern California when I was 18 years old, went to college, partied hard, started out not so hard, and then got harder. That's what she said. Yeah, I ended up going to clubs and go-go dancing and did ecstasy many times, got roofied once by a guy and a group of my friends, turns out. Drove home drunk many, many times. Oftentimes I woke up in the morning not remembering how I got home and found out I drove. Many times driving home drunk, I felt proud because I was doing such a good job staying in the lines. I did many things I'm not proud of, many things I wouldn't say to the public. Crimes, lots of crimes. I got into a heavy metal band when I was about 28 and had a fucking hell of a time on stage. I also have a lot of anger issues. I also left a boyfriend who was a good Christian man, calm, supporting, left him for the lead singer of a band who I'm pretty sure was on meth. We got in a lot of pretty intense fights that ended up being physical, and I even ended up punching him a lot one night in a blackout. It was me doing the abuse most of the time. Again, like I said, I am not proud of many things that I did. At 29 years old, I had finally been drinking and partying so much that I pretty much burned almost every bridge in my life, and got kicked out of my band for being a bitch. I found out later that was why. Understandably. My boyfriend and I broke up because it was so volatile that it was just a matter of time. And I was all alone and the other side of the country from my family. I hit a rock bottom, and a friend of mine suggested that I go to a meeting, and I went to a meeting, and I won't go into detail, but I was hooked instantly and felt like I had found my home. That was the beginning of my sobriety. From age 21 until now, my career has been in the health and fitness industry. I was a personal trainer for, I think it ended up being 13 years. And I started teaching yoga in 2009 when I started getting into it. So 2009 was when I first got sober. here's how it all kind of ties in. In the program that I got sober in, it's a very spiritual program, which I was very drawn to because I grew up in a very religious everything. And I never really felt a strong connection to anything greater than myself because he seemed like a tyrant. So joining this spiritual program that was also a place that felt like home, a place where I had something in common with people. I wasn't being judged for the many issues that I have still. It gave me a much stronger desire to get to understand my own connection with something greater than myself. So I had heard, for years and years and years that yoga is a spiritual whatever. So I started taking classes at various places in Orange County, and they all just felt like workouts. There was nothing special about them. It was stuff that I was training my clients to do in the gym. And then I found Yoga Shakti in Huntington Beach. That's where my studio was. They also have one in Irvine. But from the first class on, I just fell in love because I was able to just be, not have to go, not have to spin with the thoughts in my head that come from getting sober without being able to numb it out with drugs and alcohol. They don't go away, at least they haven't yet for me. I cried many times in Shavasana, but I was hooked right away. I knew it was something I needed, and that was what ended up becoming my home. I enrolled in the teacher training program maybe 9 months or so after I started practicing there, I think. When the 200 hour was up, I enrolled right away for the 300 hour that came up a few months later because I just wanted more and more and more. What was so profound about yoga relating to sobriety is when we studied the Yoga Sutras, which is a big portion of yoga philosophy, there were so many parts. As I was reading them, I'm like, holy shit, Bill must have practiced yoga because there's such a strong connection. And I've had many times in my life since I first got sober. I had a relapse after 2.5 years. I hit the same rock bottom as before, except this time it was worse. I had been drinking for about 3 months. I thought maybe I could handle a glass of wine, and that one glass of wine one night turned into the entire bottle, and then it was just off and running from there. And after 3 months, I was drinking straight tequila out of the bottle and hiding the bottles from my husband in our own house. And one day I was home, alone. I was home a lot because there's a million quadrillion personal trainers in Orange County, and I wasn't that busy. And I was drinking in the middle of the day, and I started getting to the point where I was feeling suicidal and hated my life, and it scared me because I've been there before. Attempted suicide when I was a teenager and went to therapy my whole life for it afterwards. So I started feeling like shit, and I knew, as they say, a belly full of booze and a head full of, I knew that I had to stop drinking, but every time I got up to grab that bottle and pour it down the drain, I would take another shot, stand against the doorway, cry, put the bottle back in the bin, lay on my bedroom floor, sobbing and writing in my journal about how much of a piece of shit I am. I couldn't stop thinking about just wanting to die. And I also knew from previous experience that I needed to start calling people. So I called one person, didn't get an answer, another person didn't get an answer, and then my friend Kirsten answered, and she came to my house immediately, picked me up, brought me down to the beach, and we just stood there on the dunes in Seal Beach, and I just put my head in her bosom and sobbed. And the next day I started the program again, got sober again. I moved back home from Southern California in 2015 because I wanted to open a yoga studio in my hometown, because I wanted to bring to the community that I grew up in the kind of healing that I wish that I had had as a kid and a teenager. My mom was a big part of that process, the whole thing. She was, like a behind-the-scenes business partner, taking care of a lot of things, and it was going great. I started hosting my own teacher training program because I needed teachers to help me out, and my mom was in the first group. And halfway through the training, my mom was diagnosed with ocular melanoma that had come back after 15 years of remission, and she died 5 days later. That was almost 3 years ago. So life's been weird since then because my husband and I moved in with my father the night she died, and we haven't left. We ended up selling our condo moving all our stuff in because we didn't want him to be alone, and that's just the way it ended up. And my brother, he's come back around, but he had a really hard time. This Saturday marks the 5-year anniversary of Yoga Home, which is the studio I opened up, and I've hosted 3 teacher trainings, and I have teachers that I've trained teaching for me, and I just recently started training to become a yoga therapist. It's crazy the way life takes you sometimes, or the direction life takes you. We can't, we can prepare, but we can't control what happens to us for the most part. I do believe that every experience we have comes from choices we have made, karma. But, there are some things that we just won't be able to explain or understand in this lifetime. And that has been something that's been part of my recent journey, is accepting that. Yoga is what keeps me sane when shit gets out of control in here and out here.